Time goes by so slowly. Time goes.
Hi, I'm Madam Nora Shikin. Today we're going to learn how to improve communication skills. There's a concept in the sales world called kiss versus kill. Keeping it short and simple versus keeping it long and lengthy. Amateur salesmen will kill the sale by going on and on about unimportant details. A good salesman, on the other hand, would hit all of the important points in the shortest time possible and close the deal. Tip number 1 is to be efficient with your speaking. Conversation is all about quality. Try to remove all types of filler words like I guess, well, you know. These words bring no value to the conversation and they literally mean nothing. Listen to the following paragraph. What did you do this winter? Well, I had an okay time this break. I went snowboarding for the first time with some of my friends and, well, it's actually a lot harder than it looked. That's about it. I guess I had fun. Haha. Now compare it to this. What did you do this winter? Me and my friends went snowboarding. It was actually my first time and it was a lot harder than it looked. Notice how the second version is much shorter, but the information being conveyed is the exact same. However, it sounds more confident and even more sophisticated. Don't be afraid to take pauses instead of relying on filler words as a crutch. Pauses can be powerful and can emphasize different parts of the message. Here's an example of pauses in action with the same sentence that we mentioned before. Me and some of my friends went snowboarding. It was actually my first time, but it was a lot harder than it looked. Tip number 2 is to use pauses to emphasize different parts of the message and to deliver more powerful messages. The following skill is probably the single most important skill in terms of overall conversation ability. If you can master this one skill, you'll be able to have endless conversation with just about anybody. Tip number 3 is conversational threading. Within every sentence, there are different topics that you can branch off into. Let's take a look at the following sentence. I live in New York City, but I've always wanted to move to the suburbs. It's because I love nature and I hate being around too many people. There are 4 different topics that you can branch off from here. You can talk about the time you wanted to visit New York City. You can talk about how you feel living in the suburbs. You can talk about your relationship with nature, and you can also talk about how you're also an introvert and how you can relate with the hate with being around too many people. When a conversation dies, it's usually because there are no other topics to talk about that are interesting. So when given the opportunity to branch off into different topics, choose one that you are interested in talking about. Also keep in mind that you want to be giving the other person opportunities to talk about multiple topics as well. If you don't give them topics to branch off into, the conversation will eventually reach a dead end. Now, the more you try to look for topics to bounce off, the more you will notice them. Here's another sentence. I like going to the gym. There's a sense of satisfaction I get when I see myself getting better at something. Now, there are 3 different topics that you can branch off from here. You can talk about how you like going to the gym. You can talk about something that satisfies you. You can also talk about something that you got better at. Think back to the last time you went on an interview. When I think of an interview, I think of something that is high tension, nerve-wracking, and definitely not something that the average person enjoys going through. A common mistake that a lot of people make when meeting someone new is entering what I like to call interview mode. They bombard the other person with question after question after question, and this can be extremely uncomfortable. The issue with asking too many questions is that it makes the conversation very one-sided. When you ask a question, you're not sharing any information about yourself. All you're doing is demanding information from the other person. This is where that uncomfortable feeling comes from. There's a lack of connection that is being built. You want to be sharing information about yourself as much as possible so that you can build a rapport, build a connection. Tip number 4 is to use statements instead of questions. When you make statements, you share information about yourself. Pay attention to the next time you hang out with your closest friends or buddies. You'll notice that the majority of the conversation is with statements. Once in a while, a question is thrown in as a natural step in the conversation, and a large majority will all be statements. Now, there are a lot of different types of statements, and I'll cover the main ones. We have the story opinion statement. Basically, a statement that tells a small story or shows your opinion on something. Here's an example of a question. What are you scared of? Here's an example of the story statement being used to replace this question. I used to be terrified of the dark. When I was a kid, I would sleep with my head under the covers to hide from all the monsters and ghosts. Notice how the question shares nothing about yourself. It doesn't really give the other person a topic to jump into besides answering your question. So you're only really giving them one thing to talk about. On the other hand, the story statement shares information while it also gives the other person opportunities to talk about different topics. You're giving them different things to thread off. They can talk about whether or not they're scared of the dark. They can talk about things they used to do when they were a kid. And they can even talk about ghost stories. All of these can be branch of this statement. Next up, we have the code red statement. This is a great way to use statements with someone you just met. Simply put, it's an observation that you make about the other person. Instead of saying something like, hey, what do you like to do for fun? You can say something like, hey, you look like a fun person. I bet you have some interesting hobbies. This is a great trick because the person can respond in 3 different ways. Number 1, you're wrong and they'll correct you. I'm actually not fun. I sleep all day. Number 2, you're wrong, but you'll be asked why you thought so. I'm actually not fun, but I'm curious to why you thought I was. Number 3, you're correct, and a large amount of rapport will be built instantaneously. I am fun. I love to dance and sing. How did you know? Each of these ways gives you many more opportunities to branch off into different topics as compared to the simple question, what do you do for fun? So you're sharing information first. You're not asking anything from them. It's up to them to decide how to respond. And finally, we have the random statement. They're completely random statements that are literally the thoughts that just pop into your mind. They can range from anything about things that are happening around you or observations. There's a whole lot of things that you can talk about. Here are some examples. I'm tired of my friends. All they talk about is sports all day. Look at that guy. He's having so much fun. I wish I could be that loose. I'm thinking about taking a year off from school. Each of these statements share a lot of information about yourself. They also provide multiple topics to branch off into. And finally, they bring a sense of creativity and spontaneousness into the conversation. There's 3 other tips that I could cover, but each one has so much information that it would literally take me an entire video to cover. We could talk about humor, which is an extremely complicated way to dance and play with your words. We could talk about storytelling, which is essentially telling a captivating and exciting story that will allow strangers to jump into your world. Or we could talk about how to have a deep conversation, which is an essential tool to building long-lasting, valuable relationship. What I'd like for you guys to do is to comment on this video and let me know which video you want me to do next. Now remember, conversation is a skill, and just like any other skill, there is value to learning it. But the most growth that will be experienced when you actually go out there and you practice what you've learned. By applying some of the tips and tricks that we covered today, you'll see a massive improvement in your future conversations. Now, the next thing that I want to cover about is the huge misconceptions about reading. There's a huge misconception about what reading is. A lot of people think that you read to retain information because in school that's what they teach you to do. They say, hey, read this book, read this textbook, and try to memorize each and every detail because guess what? We're going to test you on it. This isn't reading, it's called studying. In reality, you read to train your mind the same way working out trains your body. Only instead of breaking down your muscle fibers by applying pressure and growing them back stronger, you're literally rewiring the neurons, the fibers of your brain, into a stronger, more aligned version of itself. A version that is more capable of lifting the weights that life provides. Just like how when you work out, you become more capable of lifting the weights in the gym. A lot of people get these brief, sporadic inspirations to read. They read an entire book in a day or 2 and then they don't read for another 3 months. But this is equivalent to doing a full body workout for 4 hours in one day and not working out for another 3 months. If you ask any person who is even slightly involved in the fitness field, they will all unanimously say you're not going to see results. You're not going to see any results. The only way to see results is through consistency. So just like how people with bodies that are so amazing that you see them on the front of magazines hit the gym on a regular basis, people with amazing minds, with amazing success, they train their mind on a regular basis, but in a different way. They read. Only in our society it's not appreciated as much. You don't see the front of Cosmopolitan or GQ saying, hey, if you read the following books, it's going to make you sexier. It's going to make you irresistible. The misconception about reading is that it has very little benefits. But in reality, it is one habit that you should be doing The most important of all habits, more important than working out, more important than eating right, more important than sleeping. Yep, because when you make reading into a habit, it will give you benefits that will bring you to planes way higher than a bombshell body can ever do. It can open your mind to ideas, to inspirations, to ways of thinking, to mental fortitude that will bring you success, that will allow you to achieve your dreams. So stop focusing on just having to train your body. Train your mind as well, please. That's all for this session, guys. Until the next time, see you.